The single most successful lie in the history of advertising is sitting on someone's finger right now in every city on Earth. It's the belief that a diamond is naturally rare, that its value is inevitable, and that it's the correct way to prove you love another human being. None of those ideas emerged naturally. They were manufactured deliberately by one company that spent the 20th century controlling most of the world's diamond supply, while teaching the world exactly what those stones were supposed to mean. For nearly 100 years, that company, De Beers, ran one of the most profitable monopolies capitalism has ever produced. It controlled the mines, it controlled the supply, it controlled the price. Most impressively, it convinced billions of people they were choosing diamonds freely. Then, over the course of about 2 decades, the entire system began to unravel. Not because people stopped getting married, not because diamonds suddenly went out of fashion. The monopoly broke because of a truth De Beers had spent its entire existence keeping out of sight. A truth that turned out to be the one thing no amount of money, market power, or advertising could hold back forever. Here's what you have to understand first, because it sounds almost impossible. Diamonds are far less naturally scarce than most people believe. The reason natural diamonds command such extraordinary prices isn't simply because they're difficult to find. It's because, for most of the 20th century, most of the world's diamond supply never reached anything resembling a free market. Their value depended on one condition: that enough diamonds stayed out of your hands. Sit with that contradiction for a second. De Beers didn't become one of the most powerful companies on Earth by discovering a scarce treasure and selling it. It became powerful by taking something far more abundant than people realized and manufacturing the appearance of scarcity. Sometimes it bought mines simply to keep their diamonds off the market. It stockpiled enormous quantities in vaults because releasing too many would have destroyed the scarcity that gave them value. The most valuable thing De Beers ever produced wasn't a diamond. It was the belief that diamonds were running out. And unlike a mine, that belief had to be defended constantly. Because the moment people discovered another way to create the same product, the story that held the entire empire together would begin to fall apart. The scale of De Beers' dominance is difficult to overstate. At its peak during the 20th century, the company controlled roughly 80 to 90% of the world's rough diamond supply. It operated what was effectively a global cartel through a tightly controlled distribution system in London, where a small group of hand-picked buyers, known as site holders, were invited several times a year to purchase sealed boxes of diamonds. There was no negotiation. The price was fixed before they entered. Take the box or leave it. The most famous piece of the monopoly wasn't even a mine. It was an advertising campaign. In 1947, the agency N.W. Ayer created the slogan, "A diamond is forever." It has since been described as one of the most successful advertising campaigns ever created, because it didn't simply sell diamonds, it changed culture. Before the campaign, diamond engagement rings were far from universal. After it, millions of people came to see a diamond not as one option among many, but as the only acceptable symbol of lasting commitment. That's the remarkable part of this story. De Beers didn't just convince people to buy diamonds, it convinced generations of people that choosing anything else meant buying the wrong symbol of love. And once a company controls not only the supply of a product, but the meaning attached to that product, it has built something far stronger than a monopoly. It has built a belief. To understand how De Beers held on to this monopoly for so long, you have to understand the one rule that governs almost every monopoly in history. It's simpler than most people think. A monopoly survives on exactly one thing: control of supply. If you're the only person who can provide something people want, you decide the price. The moment someone else can provide the same thing, your power starts to disappear because the customer suddenly has somewhere else to go. Branding and marketing matter, but supply decides who has power. Control it, and you control the market. Lose it, and eventually you lose everything. That simple rule explains almost the entire history of De Beers. For nearly a century, the source of diamonds was the ground, a relatively small number of mines spread across a handful of countries. De Beers spent decades buying them, partnering with them, or signing exclusive agreements that ensured most of the world's diamonds flowed through its hands before they ever reached a jeweler. If a major discovery threatened the market, De Beers often bought the production. If prices looked weak, it simply released fewer diamonds. The monopoly wasn't really controlling diamonds, it was controlling how many diamonds the world was allowed to see. For almost 100 years, that strategy worked, because the source never changed. Then, quietly, it did. Not another mine, not another country, a laboratory. Scientists learned how to grow real diamonds. Not imitations, real diamonds, chemically, physically, and optically identical to mined stones. Even experienced jewelers usually need specialized equipment to tell them apart. And that's the moment the entire business model began to break. Because De Beers had spent a century making sure it controlled every important hole in the ground. Then the ground stopped mattering. The source wasn't the earth anymore. The source was a machine. Think about what that meant. Imagine spending 100 years buying every well in the desert because you believed controlling the wells meant controlling the water. Then, somebody invents a machine that pulls drinking water directly out of the air. Your wells still exist, they're still valuable, but they no longer determine who gets water. That's exactly what happened to De Beers. Its monopoly wasn't defeated because someone stole its mines. Its monopoly was defeated because the mines stopped being the only place diamonds could come from. And once the source changed, the one thing De Beers had always depended on, control over supply, started slipping away. Now watch how each layer of the monopoly's collapse made the next one inevitable. The first crack appeared before laboratories entered the picture. It came from the ground itself. Throughout the late 20th century, major diamond deposits were discovered outside De Beers' control, in Russia, Canada, and Australia. For the first time in decades, large producers could sell diamonds without routing them through De Beers' distribution system. The company's grip on global supply began to loosen. Its market share, once close to total dominance, steadily fell toward roughly a third of world production. The monopoly was already weaker than it looked. The laboratories simply exposed it. The second layer was the one customers could actually see. As laboratory-grown diamonds improved, they became dramatically cheaper. A stone that looked identical to a mined diamond often sold for a fraction of the price. For a young couple standing in a jewelry store, the calculations suddenly changed. If two diamonds look the same, test the same, last forever, why does one cost 3 or 4 times more? That single question was enough to undermine a century of carefully managed scarcity. The third layer is where the story becomes almost tragic for De Beers. For decades, the company had insisted that a diamond's value came from its natural origin, that a mined diamond was real, that anything else was somehow lesser. Then reality forced a remarkable reversal. In 2018, De Beers launched Lightbox, its own laboratory-grown diamond brand. The company that had spent generations defending mined diamonds was now selling laboratory-grown ones, not because it wanted to, because it had to. The monopoly wasn't just competing against new technology anymore, it was competing against its own mythology. And the fourth layer is the one that makes everything before it matter. Remember the belief we started with, that diamonds are naturally rare. That rarity explains their value. Laboratory-grown diamonds didn't just introduce competition, they challenged the story itself. Because once consumers realized a chemically identical diamond could be produced inside a machine, the obvious question became impossible to avoid. If the product is the same, what exactly am I paying for? That question is devastating to a monopoly built on scarcity. Because once people begin questioning scarcity, they're no longer arguing about diamonds. They're questioning the foundation of the entire market. And once you understand the mechanism behind a magic trick, you can never watch it the same way again.